Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of the Bison Regional Science Fair's official podcast, BRSF STEMcasts. Today we've got a topic that I'd say is very fitting for a podcast affiliated with a science fair and a very knowledgeable guest whom I'm sure can tell us all about it, Dr. Bonnie Schmidt. Thank you so much for being here. It's absolutely an honor. Now, Dr. Schmidt is the founder and president of Let's Talk Science, one of, if not Canada's largest youth science foundations, with the admirable goal of educating Canadian youth in what is, in my opinion, the world's most important fields. That is to say, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, otherwise known as STEM. Now, if you want to learn more about Let's Talk Science's STEM initiative, we'll have their website linked in the description. Now, without any further ado, let's get into today's topic. Getting started with science. So, Dr. Schmidt, what would you say is a good way to get engaged in the science community?
In the community in general? Well, first of all, I want to thank you for inviting me on your show. I think it's absolutely fantastic that you're getting this podcast going, and it's a real honor for
Thank
me
you for
to
being
be
here.
your early guest. It's great. Having a great time. So I guess to get involved with the science community in general, as a student, it's actually pretty easy. Think about the kinds of topics that you're interested in, show your passion for the topic, and be bold. Go and knock on someone's door when the COVID restrictions are gone, right?
Of
Email, call. It has been my experience over my entire career that people are really keen to talk to students, and especially students that show a real passion or interest in their work. So I think you should be bold. I think you can get engaged in the community right now. And then as you progress through studies, and if you stay in the science community as part of your work, there are many, many, many things that you can do. And I think we might talk about that a little bit later in the show.
Of course. And to add on to that, there are, of course, wonderful STEM education-oriented organizations like Let's Talk Science. In my opinion, I think it would be a great idea to get your friends into it too, right?
That would be very cool. And in fact, with Let's Talk Science, the outreach program, you can get volunteers from local universities and colleges engaged in your classroom. So you can get your friends involved, you can set up clubs, you can bring in volunteers through Let's Talk Science. There's so many things that you can do. You can set up your own club and get some volunteers in to help you.
Everybody has that scientific potential. Like, why not enjoy unlocking it with your buddies?
Totally.
So there's also what this podcast is all about, science fair. So what do you think, Dr. Schmidt, is the best way somebody could approach starting a science fair project?
Yeah, it's science fairs are fantastic. What I really love about them is the inquiry-based approach.
Yes.
So they allow you to take a longer period of time to explore something that's really interesting. And I think that's the key for getting started. It's to know it's going to take a little bit of time to really get into it, and so don't leave it to the last minute, for sure. And think about topics that really interest you. So do you have a passion in a particular field? Can you think of a big wicked problem that you, your family, your community, the world might be dealing with? And start to think a little bit about what motivates you, because keep in mind, doing a science fair project, especially one that's competitive, means you've got to actually think in pretty sophisticated ways, put the study together, figure out, gather evidence. So it's really important to do something that really gets you excited.
That's very true. I think what you said, it's a very good idea to find a big problem that you see in the world and that you want to solve. And in my experience, it's a good idea to come up with the weirdest possible way you can solve it, but still being efficient, because of course we don't want to make things worse. And that way you can add up onto your project as you go, right? And eventually you'll have a bunch of research that you can contribute to the vast sea of research that is going to solve your problem.
Yeah,
So
well, that's
yeah.
fantastic. I do want to make sure that your listeners know that you don't have to try to solve one of the most complicated
Right.
issues that is facing people
Of
in order
course.
to get started, right? So
Right.
depending on where you're at, even just getting your toe in the water and getting
Mm-hmm.
involved in science fair projects, you can search the Let's Talk Science website for
Yes.
ideas, for articles and
Mhm.
videos, and people who are doing really interesting science STEM-based careers, just to get some ideas. And then as you get kind of pulled into it, you can get more sophisticated and more complex
Mhm.
as you design problems year over year. So I think your approach is a great idea.
Right. And what it comes down to is you just have to make sure you're having fun, right? It's
Absolutely.
just like that saying, find something you love to do and you'll never work a day in your life, right?
That's awesome. So you can set yourself up as an entrepreneur
Right.
early on in your career. I think it's also really important for students to realize that there's not just one type of problem to try
Mhm.
to tackle in order to do a really good science fair project,
Right.
right? Like we tend to overemphasize the idea of, the scientific method and
Mhm.
controlled experiments. But
Right.
really, science can be done in so many different ways and forms.
Exactly.
So, students getting started, it really is important to find something that you're interested in rather than think about what can I do in a
Mhm.
controlled environment setting, right? Think about geology, think about astronomy, think
Right.
about the complexities of climate change that you're
Mhm.
thinking about, and know that there's a lot of different ways to come at it. But the most important thing is to be gathering evidence. So trying to ask your question in a way that will allow you to make observations, that will allow you to gather evidence, but it
Mhm.
doesn't always have to be in a controlled experiment kind of a
Right.
format.
Then again, it's also like it's about the journey, not necessarily just about the destination. Now, speaking of the destination, what advice would you think you'd give to somebody who'd like to pursue a career in science?
Where to start? Well, I think my first piece of advice is to know that science is really broad. When
Yes.
I was in university, I thought if you studied science, you'd be a doctor, you'd be a
Mm-hmm.
nurse, a science teacher.
Right.
Very limited. My own ideas were very limited. But a few years later, with Let's Talk Science, I've seen that there's science everywhere,
Yes,
and the
exactly.
emerging occupations that are becoming increasingly shaped by technology are
Mm-hmm.
really requiring an understanding, a comfort, a confidence in science and building those kinds of STEM-based skills. So even if you don't think you want to stay in research forever, the grounding and the opportunities of having science-based careers are absolutely huge. So my advice would be keep your doors open, stay in science and math courses through high school so you can open up anything you want to do at the post-secondary level.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you decide you want to go into a completely different field, then you'd at least have the level of science knowledge to enable you to participate in really meaningful ways as an engaged citizen. So stay in your science and maths as long as you possibly can through high school. Know that it's a very diverse field that
Mm-hmm.
really depends on having people who are creative and are critical thinkers who can communicate really well. So the other advice, even if you know you want to go into a science discipline, is to not narrow yourself too early. It's
Right.
important to have a diverse view, to come at problems in really different and creative ways. So make sure that you take other subjects, that you get involved in other things, that you read lots, listen to cool
Mm-hmm.
podcasts, really explore the world, take it
Right.
all in.
Of
And then
course.
when you actually are landing in your career, you're going to be able to contribute in really meaningful and diverse ways, and you'll have a great time and build a really solid career.
Sounds great. So, Dr. Schmidt, what exactly inspired you to start with science?
Well, my background actually comes from a little bit of failure. So when
Oh.
I was in elementary school and high school, I did very well in school,
Mm-hmm.
and I always thought I wanted to be a dentist. I actually never wanted to be a doctor, but I kind of liked being in the idea of being in the healthcare
Mm-hmm.
profession. So I did really well. I got a scholarship into my first year at university, and then I proceeded to fail calculus. I failed physics. I
Mm-hmm.
got a C in chemistry. I really didn't do very well in first year. So I had to regroup.
Right.
And I did actually manage to pull myself up again and did very well for the rest of university. But to get into dental school, you actually have to be good at manual dexterity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out
Yes.
I'm not. So I failed the dental exam, the carving exam twice, like twice. So here's
Okay.
somebody who comes in with a scholarship, did well all the way through school, suddenly facing failure.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what to do. And I actually kind of stumbled into doing graduate school. And it was the best thing that happened to me because it was there that I really learned to be independent, to ask questions, to explore and discover the world. And as
Right.
I was doing my PhD in physiology, I started Let's Talk Science.
Mm-hmm.
So my career really benefited from my science education, but now I actually run a business
Oh.
and we employ people, and we have thousands of volunteers who are able to go out and work with students like you and your colleagues right across the country and train teachers. So my science background has been hugely instrumental for my career path, but it sure wasn't the way I thought it was going to turn out. It's been a fantastic adventure.
Right, and I think that's one of the common misconceptions about things like being a doctor or dentist. Like, you don't have to be absolutely perfect all the time to end up somewhere great, right?
Absolutely not. I am really not sure I would have been a good dentist based on my manual skills, but
Right.
I love what I do with Let's Talk Science and the opportunity to work with students right across the
Right.
country.
And that draws back to finding something you like doing in a science fair so that you end up not
That's right.
getting too disencouraged with it.
That's right.
So that appears to be all we have prepared for the questions, and it appears that's the all the time we have for today. And I think it was a very wonderful conversation we had on getting started with science with Dr. Bonnie Schmidt. And once again, a big thank you to you, Dr. Schmidt, for helping us kick off the series on a good note. I really cannot thank you enough. Is there any parting advice you'd like to give to our viewers or listeners?
Oh, it's been my absolute honor to be with you. I loved your earlier advice of having fun.
Right.
Right. Science is a human endeavor. And
Hmm.
the whole point of science is just to provide a framework to ask questions about the world. So it's
Right.
all around how do we unlock the mysteries? How can we do better? How can we help improve our lives, the lives of others, and improve the world around us through this cool framework and way of looking at the world called science? So you got to have fun and work together. I wish you the very best with this podcast. I think it's a
Thank you.
fantastic thing for you to do, and look forward to helping you find some guests too. Maybe
Of
I'll come
course.
back and see how it's all
Please
been
do.
working out. That would be great, Jed. I'd love that.
Thank you so much. Some very wise advice from a very knowledgeable scientist. Thank you again. And now make sure to let us know what you guys think or any questions you might have down in the comments or on our socials at BRSF_MB on Instagram and at Bison Fair on Twitter. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on STEMcasts. Bye bye.